David Gilbert and Joanne Luquito were engaged to be married and had plans to buy a house together. To prepare for the down payment, David withdrew a little over $35,000 from his 401k retirement account and deposited it into a joint savings account that he opened with Joanne. This was a significant financial decision because David was under the age of 59 and a half, which meant he would incur tax penalties for withdrawing from his 401k early. The only logical reason to do this was for a specific major purchase like a house. David made it clear that this money was for their future home. Sometime later, while David was away on a business trip, Joanne got into a heated argument with David's former wife. The argument became nasty, and Joanne became upset. She then went to the bank and withdrew $5,000 from the joint savings account. When David found out, he was shocked and demanded the money back. Joanne refused, claiming that the money was shared because they were in a relationship and she had a right to it. David took her to court to recover his money. During the court hearing, Joanne tried to defend herself by saying she and David had a verbal and written agreement that all money was our money and that either of them could withdraw funds at any time. She also claimed that she used the money for shared expenses like food, groceries, and bills. However, when the judge asked her to provide details, Joanne admitted that she used a large portion of the money to pay off her personal MasterCard bill. She also spent money on massages at a spa, clothes from Banana Republic, gift certificates for clients, restaurant meals, and even bought David a new wardrobe because she loved him. The judge pointed out that David's credit card statement showed he paid for all their dinners and restaurant bills, so Joanne's claim of shared expenses didn't hold up. The judge asked Joanne why David would take money from his retirement account and incur tax penalties if it wasn't for a specific purpose like buying a house. Joanne couldn't provide a satisfactory answer. The judge concluded that Joanne had no right to take that money because it was specifically set aside for the house down payment. If the money was meant for daily expenses, David would have put it in a checking account, not a savings account. Joanne was ordered to pay David back the full $5,000. The judge told Joanne she was not entitled to take that money just because the relationship ended badly. The judge also noted that Joanne's behavior was irresponsible and that she should have respected David's financial contribution to their future together. The judgment was clear: Joanne had no legal or moral right to spend that money on herself. After the hearing, David expressed relief that justice was served. He said he was shocked that Joanne would not only take the money but also try to justify it by saying it was for shared expenses. Joanne, on the other hand, was angry and called David a liar and a cheater. She felt that David had wronged her by cheating on her, and she believed she was entitled to compensation for the emotional pain he caused. However, the judge made it clear that personal grievances do not give someone the right to take money that was specifically earmarked for a house. The case served as a reminder that when you are in a relationship, it is important to have clear financial boundaries and to respect each other's contributions. David walked away with a $5,000 judgment, and Joanne learned a costly lesson about entitlement. Heather Barkley and Melissa Case worked together at a beauty salon and were friends. Heather owned a house and needed a roommate, so she offered Melissa a room to rent for $650 a month, which included all bills. Melissa agreed and moved in on August 14. Heather also asked Melissa to give 30 days' notice if she ever decided to move out, just as a courtesy. Melissa was excited about the arrangement because she needed a stable place to live for herself and her young son. Heather was happy to have a roommate to help with the bills and believed that living with Melissa would be a positive experience since they were already friends. Melissa's financial situation was unstable. She had been put on a leave of absence from work to finish school, but after graduating, she was not offered her job back. This caused a lot of stress for Melissa, especially since she was also going through a divorce. She struggled to pay her rent on time. Heather was patient and understanding because they were friends. She told Melissa to pay what you can and gave her time to get back on her feet. Melissa paid small amounts here and there in cash, but she never paid the full rent. Heather kept a careful record of every payment Melissa made because she knew that eventually, Melissa would need to catch up. However, the friendship started to deteriorate because Heather, who was a supervisor at the salon, had to deliver the bad news that Melissa probably wouldn't get her job back. This created tension between them. Heather felt guilty because she had encouraged Melissa to move in with the promise of a stable job, but the owner of the salon was giving Heather the runaround and making her look bad. Melissa felt betrayed because she believed Heather knew all along that she wouldn't get her job back. The tension in the house grew, and Melissa started to withdraw from Heather. She stopped communicating and avoided Heather whenever possible. Eventually, Melissa decided to move out. She wrote Heather a letter on October 31 saying she intended to leave, but the letter did not specify a date. Heather assumed Melissa would give 30 days' notice and move out on November 30. But Melissa moved out on November 4 without giving proper notice. Heather felt hurt and betrayed because she had been so patient and supportive, yet Melissa left without even having a proper conversation with her. Heather sued Melissa for $1,500 in unpaid rent. Heather believed that Melissa owed her for the months she lived there without paying the full amount, plus the cost of the empty room while she searched for a new roommate. In court, Melissa argued that Heather had forgiven the debt because Heather told her to pay what you can. Melissa also said she was embarrassed about not having money and that she had every intention of paying Heather back. However, the judge carefully calculated all the payments Melissa had made. Melissa owed $169 for August, paid $300 in September, and paid $160 in October. This left a balance of $99 that was still unpaid. The judge also looked at Melissa's letter and noted that Melissa acknowledged she owed money and wanted to pay it back. But since Melissa had no bank records and everything was paid in cash, the judge had to rely on Heather's ledger. The judge ruled that Melissa owed $99 for the time she actually lived there. The 30-day notice claim was not enforced because the judge saw that the relationship had become tense and Melissa was likely embarrassed to face Heather. The judge also noted that Melissa's letter was heartfelt and showed that she genuinely cared about Heather and their friendship. However, Melissa's actions didn't match her words. She left without proper notice and never made a serious effort to repay the debt. The judge awarded Heather $99 and encouraged them to try and repair their friendship, but it was clear that the trust had been broken. Heather was disappointed that her kindness was taken advantage of, and Melissa learned that avoiding problems doesn't make them go away. The case was a sad example of how money and stress can ruin even the strongest friendships. Lindsay Monry and David Stamper had a brief and tumultuous relationship. They lived together for about a year and a half, but things were never stable. Lindsay sued David for two main reasons. First, David had taken Lindsay to the airport in her rental car and was supposed to return it. Instead, he kept the car and wrecked it. The rental car company charged Lindsay over $1,000 for the damage, which she still hadn't paid, and it went to collections. Second, Lindsay claimed David assaulted her on two separate occasions, causing her severe emotional stress that led to a miscarriage. David countersued Lindsay for stealing all his furniture and personal belongings when she moved out. When the judge questioned David about the rental car, he admitted he wrecked it. However, he claimed that Lindsay had previously damaged his car during an argument. David said Lindsay intentionally backed into his car and totaled it. Lindsay countered that David jumped on her car and chased her in a high-speed chase, and she hit his car accidentally while trying to escape. They had supposedly agreed to call it even on the car damage because David didn't pay Lindsay back for bailing him out of jail. But David never sued Lindsay for his car damage, so the judge dismissed his claim. Lindsay had a bill from the rental company showing she owed $1,031 plus interest, so David was ordered to pay that amount. Regarding the assault claim, Lindsay said David pushed her into a mirror during an argument after she told him she was pregnant. She claimed the stress from the assault caused her to have a miscarriage. However, the police report showed that when officers arrived, they saw no visible marks on Lindsay. She also had no medical report linking the assault to the miscarriage. The judge told Lindsay that stress alone is not enough to prove a miscarriage was caused by the assault. The judge also noted that Lindsay stayed in the relationship even after the alleged assault, which weakened her claim. The assault claim was dismissed. The judge was firm in telling Lindsay that she cannot expect the court to award damages for emotional distress without proper medical evidence to support her claims. David countersued Lindsay for stealing his furniture, including a bed, couch, love seat, entertainment center, and kitchen items. Lindsay admitted she took some items but said most of the furniture was hers, and she had David's friend come and pick up his clothes. The judge asked David why he waited over 5 months to sue for his property if it was so important to him. David couldn't give a good reason. He said he was in jail for a while and had other issues to deal with, but the judge pointed out that he was out of jail for months before filing the countersuit. The judge dismissed his countersuit. The only thing Lindsay had to return was a large hammer that belonged to David. The judge told both of them to choose their partners more carefully next time. Lindsay got $1,031 for the rental car damage, and David got nothing except his hammer. The relationship between Lindsay and David was clearly toxic from the start. There were allegations of physical violence, high-speed chases, and mutual destruction of property. The judge expressed frustration at both parties for allowing the situation to escalate to the point where they needed court intervention. Lindsay was awarded the money for the rental car because David admitted fault, but her assault claim was dismissed due to lack of evidence. David's countersuit was dismissed because he failed to act in a timely manner. The case served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of getting involved in volatile relationships and the importance of documenting financial agreements and disputes. Both parties left the courtroom with unresolved anger and a bitter taste in their mouths. Dan Allen ran a small catering business selling burritos from his truck. He would visit various offices every day to serve lunch to employees. One of his clients was Destiny Phoenix's office. Destiny was the office manager and was responsible for ordering food for the staff. Dan claimed that Destiny made false and defamatory statements about him, which caused him to lose her business and also caused other businesses to cancel their contracts with him. He sued her for slander. Dan was convinced that Destiny had a personal vendetta against him and deliberately sabotaged his business out of spite. The first issue the judge addressed was the loss of Destiny's business. The judge explained that Dan did not have a written contract with Destiny. He only had a verbal agreement that allowed him to come to her office daily to sell burritos. This was a day-to-day arrangement, not a long-term contract. Destiny had the right to stop using Dan's services at any time without giving a reason. So, the part of Dan's lawsuit regarding losing Destiny's business was dismissed. The judge made it clear that any business owner has the right to choose whom they do business with, and no one is obligated to continue a working relationship indefinitely. The second and more serious part of Dan's lawsuit was the claim that Destiny made false statements to other businesses, causing them to stop using his services. Dan claimed Destiny told other clients that he smelled like alcohol and didn't have a food license. However, when the judge asked Dan to provide evidence of these statements, he couldn't. Dan tried to present a written statement from one of his other clients, Chris Lero. The judge asked Chris to testify, but Chris admitted he was not a witness to any defamatory statements made by Destiny. Chris was only there as a character witness to say he had never seen Dan smelling of alcohol. The judge explained that this was hearsay and could not be admitted as evidence. The judge further explained that for a defamation case to succeed, Dan needed to prove that Destiny actually made false statements to third parties and that those statements caused him financial loss. Dan had no direct evidence of these statements. He only had a recording on his phone where Destiny left a message, but that was not proof of her speaking to other businesses. The judge also noted that hearsay statements are not allowed in court because they don't allow the other party to cross-examine the person who made the statement. This would be unfair to Destiny. Since Dan could not provide any reliable evidence or witnesses to prove Destiny defamed him to other businesses, his entire case was dismissed. The judge commended Dan for trying but said he did not have enough evidence to win. Dan was clearly frustrated by the outcome. He felt that Destiny had ruined his reputation and cost him valuable business. However, the judge explained that in the eyes of the law, you cannot win a defamation case based on suspicion and hearsay. You need concrete evidence, such as witnesses who heard the defamatory statements or documentation proving that the statements were made. Dan didn't have that. Destiny, on the other hand, seemed relieved that the case was dismissed. She maintained that she never made any false statements about Dan and that he was simply upset about losing her business. The case highlighted the importance of having solid evidence before filing a lawsuit. Without it, even the most heartfelt claims will fail in court. Dan left the courtroom knowing that he needed to gather more evidence if he ever wanted to pursue a defamation case in the future.